so much for allowing me to, God, it's loud. I didn't know that I need this guy. Allowing me to come here tonight. But before I go a minute further, I want to introduce the most important guest that came to hear this tonight, Mr. Aiden Adjus. Stand up and recognize. How many of you in the audience are faculty members? Teaching? What do you teach?
English. Communication studies.
And both of you are communication studies. Any other faculty members? Any of you Mariachis? Absolutely. Any nursing people, faculty? Any physicians? Okay. Tonight I'm going to talk to you about 40 minutes, and I'm going to talk to you about how I see, through my perceptual lens, the healthcare system in America. Now, please understand, this is my bias, and none of us are without bias. But these are things that I have observed in healthcare over the last 42 years. And one of the things that Ted didn't tell you is I did not go to graduate school till I was 60 years old to get the master's in communication. I was the oldest one in the class, and Jim McCroskey taught the first course I took. And at 9 o'clock at night, and I normally go to bed at 7, he said, we're going to have a test tomorrow. So over the first night's lecture, I stayed up all night, pulled an all-nighter, and I was very nervous about that test, but traveled through that journey. And the reason I'm here is the person that taught me research methods and theories was Dr. Adjus. He was my teacher. And at that time, Ted and I, he was teaching about numbers, and numbers is something that I'm not uncomfortable with. Some people are uncomfortable with numbers. And we sort of had a simpatico, to use a Spanish term, and talked about what we thought communication could add to the future of healthcare. And Ted has been a huge inspiration, and I hope an inspiration to those of you here. We have him frequently in West Virginia as a consultant and have him talking from all levels of the healthcare strata, from pre-hospital care through physicians, and he's always sort of the rock star that enters the stage. So you're very, very lucky to have him here at Ashland, and I think going through the future, you'll find his ideas are going to open huge doors for opportunity, for employment, for those of you that are interested in healthcare. Now, where did all of this begin? And I use the word modern healthcare because in this article, which Ted kindly shared with me today, and Ted didn't realize it, this was from Newsweek magazine in September of this year, and it says, "Hospitals can kill you." It is written by Marty Macri, who was, by reading the article, obviously a graduate of Harvard Medical School, because his teacher was Lucien Leap. Lucien Leap is a 6'4" pediatric surgeon at Boston Children's Hospital, used to be at the University of Kansas. And he really published the first article in modern literature about errors being made in medicine. Now, I'm sort of like that guy that tells the rest of the story, and I'm going to tell you the rest of the story later on, but I'm going to tell you that he looked at healthcare in the Harvard Medical Plan, and he said, we're killing people in our healthcare system through error, and we can do better. This then trumped the Institutes of Medicine in 1999 to publish To Err is Human, and To Err is Human said, we think we're killing somewhere between 40 and 100,000 people every year in the healthcare system. So the country became alarmed by that, and I can tell you that is a very conservative estimate, because the death rates in hospitals from human error are probably much in the range of 200,000 to 300,000 patients a year. Now, I'm not trying to suggest to you, when you had the big one, that you should take a bare aspirin and go to bed and stay at home. Nor am I suggesting if you're in an auto crash that you should sort of sit on the street corner and wait for the bleeding to stop, unless you have this athletic trainer there. And I've learned today they can do almost anything. So you could call, what's your name? Yeah, you call you, right? If they're in a car wreck. All right, Lucian Leap was the first to call our attention to this. Next slide. All right, look at healthcare. It is huge business. It is 17% of our gross national product until we had the what's called Obamacare come out in 2009. The attempt to get a handle on this, and I don't care what political persuasion you are, I give President Obama huge credit for doing what 12 presidents before him could not do, and that is to begin to try to solve the healthcare dilemma. If not, by 2050, it's estimated that healthcare would be 50% of the gross national product. So no nation can afford to spend half of its money. And unfortunately, of the 12 industrialized nations in the world, we spend the most money, a little over $8,000 per person per year on healthcare in this country, and we have probably the last or the lousiest healthcare system. Now, we are very good with rare and exotic diseases. People come from all over the world to see us about the exotic. But treat the common cold, treat the flu. How many of you have called the doctor and the doctor said, well, we'll be happy to see you next week for your cold? Has that ever happened to any of you? Until this urgent care business or doctors on Express or whatever, that just wasn't available. And so it employs about 14 million people. 1 million of those people are physicians. Between 3 and 5 million are nurses. And the rest, 80% of the care given in healthcare is given by non-nurses and non-physicians. So there are many, many jobs available in healthcare and an expanding horizon for those of you who are interested in communication. How many of you were bribed to come here by getting extra credit?
I was.
Yeah, you got extra credit? Okay. Anyway, we see this as divided sort of in a trilogy. The future of communication in healthcare is going to be on the interpersonal side of communication, looking at provider-patient relationships, medical informatics, the Affordable Health Care Act, or Obamacare of 2009, mandated by 2014 that we have electronic medical records. Electronic medical records many times interrupt the patient and doctor and nurse practitioner or whatever interview, and the reason is they're sitting there typing into a screen rather than making eye contact with the patient. But the problems in the electronic healthcare record system are huge only because there's virtually no cross-linking. And when you're in an emergency and you're working in the emergency room, you don't want to have to put in passwords and codes and go through 6 links before you get the vital information that you need. So our healthcare system electronically right now is not even defined, and it is a colossal mess. And so that's a huge field, interfacing the human and machine in healthcare communications, and I put S on the end of the word for that. So those are two very, very important things that we talk about. But tonight I'm only going to talk about risk. and what is the risk in healthcare, and what can we do to make it better, and some of the experiments that Dr. App just helped us design. And one thing that I learned a long time ago, if you want to do research, you hire yourself a PhD. You don't try to. Most physicians are not geared to do research. And so Ted has been a consultant to these studies that I'm going to show you that have helped to lay the foundation where communication can be valuable. And the key to that is we have gotten our work published in top peer-reviewed journals, both in medicine and in communication. So both fields are recognizing how important this burgeoning field, and I understand you're working through the system to maybe have a major in this at some point in time. Yeah. So it'll be the first in the country. Ted sort of taught the first course in medical communication at WVU for a couple of years that we know of existing in this country. But anyway, healthcare employs 9% of the U.S. workforce. Okay, I'm going to quickly go through these slides. Something untoward happened. It's known as an adverse event. A sentinel event, on the other hand, is an unexpected occurrence that causes either death or significant injury to a patient. And a near miss is sort of a close call, but it didn't happen. By the way, I want to introduce, you're Stephanie? That's Stephanie, and this is JPEG. They're my assistants. Her name is Ashley. I call her JPEG because she was talking, I don't even know what a JPEG is. I'm computer illiterate, but she was talking about JPEGs in a class that she had earlier today, so I named her that. Next slide. There are basically acts of commission and acts of omission. And commission is when you don't understand what you're doing, and omission is when you're just plain lazy and you don't take the time. Communicating is hard work. How many of you think it's a natural ability? Do you think it's a natural ability, Aiden? No, you don't. It's not a natural ability. It's something that can and must be taught. And it's hard work. And I don't always do it well, but if I step back and look at my background in communication studies, there's this whole world of the science of how we communicate interpersonally with each other, let alone through the computer and all the other ways that we will and continue to be exploring in healthcare. Next. This is something from Ted in my book, and I want to point out how errors occur in the healthcare system. Most of them are systemic errors, but if you look, we've divided it with error and without error. Now, there can be a system error. Double dosing occurs, and you can go back and trace that. I gave a patient a blood thinner, and the next nurse comes along and gives a patient a blood thinner. You can detect that error. But if I draw up something in a syringe and it's a clear fluid, do I always know? And the perfect example was, have any of you heard the story about the spinal injections with the steroids from the company in Massachusetts? Well, there's no way you could have drawn that up and seen that there was fungus in it. You can't see fungus. So that type of error would be a system error that is totally not observable. So there are various categories of errors that occur in the healthcare system. And when we have a sentinel event, we look through all the various events that may have happened, and sometimes they are because of acts of commission and omission, and sometimes they just occur. And there's nothing that we realistically could do to prevent it. Peter Prenovost is an interesting fellow with an MD, PhD. He's an internist and has done considerable research in error in healthcare. But he's the one, have any of you heard the Josie King story? Josie King was a little child who was at Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore, one of the best-known hospitals in the country. And Josie King's mother said, "There's something the matter with my child." And the physicians, because of fatigue, because of whatever, but mainly because of arrogance, said, "There's nothing the matter with the child, it's all the matter with you." And Josie King, the baby, died. And the death was because of an intravenous line sepsis. And so the mother filed a suit, and she was awarded a large award, and she then donated that to the establishment of the Josie King Foundation, which basically, the mission for this nonprofit is to combat arrogance in the healthcare field. Because what we know, and Peter Prenovost has established, that 90% of the time that a mistake happens in healthcare, someone in the room, and that's going to be one of you in the future, many of you are nursing students. How many nursing students? A lot. Many of you are going to be in the room, and you're going to know that an error is being made. And hopefully you will learn through this course that's Ed's given, it's not about you, it's not about him or her, it's about the patient. And the right thing to do is to speak up when you know that an error is about to occur. Do you disagree? I love this girl because every time I talk to her, her face gets red. She sat in the front. What's your name? Ashland. Same as yours. JPEG's name. Okay, next. The authority gradient is that balance of power that we need to knock down in our current healthcare system. And I'm going to show you some studies where we have worked on that. Okay? All right. This is an interesting correlation in high-stress industries. This is an ICU study, and if you look at the number of functions that occurred in the ICU, what they found is that an error rate was made at a 1% level. Okay, if we were to compare this with the airline industry, with the postal industry, and with banking, it would be that 20 planes would land unsafely at O'Hare every day. We would put 160,000 pieces of mail would be lost every hour, and 320,000 bank checks would be deducted from the wrong bank account every hour. At this point, I want to introduce Chris Molnar. Chris is the executive director at the Rural Emergency Trauma Institute. We worked together, and we stole her from the banking industry. And Chris had some health challenges, and she became interested in healthcare and makes our operation work. How would this be? Chris was a bank president before she came to us of a very large bank. How would this be accepted by your banking population if you had that many checks?
They couldn't answer.
You wouldn't be able to answer the phones. It's a huge proportion. So to put this in perspective, we don't do very well with healthcare. And we need to get way, way, way below that 1% error rate. Now, what the Joint Commission tells us is 70% of the errors that occur are because of communication. And 75% of those errors, the patient simply dies. The patient dies because of our miscommunication. Now, the Agency for Healthcare Quality Research tells us that more patients die from communication than die in car wrecks. AIDS almost trumps breast cancer. How much money is spent? Now, you're getting credit for this class. Don't be leaving. Take them off the list, Ed. It is a shocking number, and yet we spend billions and billions of dollars on breast cancer research, and we spend, Chris is chairman of the board of a hospital. I asked her coming up here, how much money do you spend on communication? Your answer?
I don't know, but I don't.
Yeah, and that's pretty classic. Lots of money is spent on something to do that's interventional, but something as simple as social science, they don't want to spend money on. And it's comparatively much cheaper. Next. Now this is a definition of communication. The process of a source stimulating meaning in the mind of the receiver by means of verbal and nonverbal messages. This is Virginia Richmond and James C. McCroskey's definition. It is one of hundreds of definitions. Am I safe to say that? Everybody defines it differently. But looking at a process, what is a process? Ashley, I'd love to call on you. Yeah, I told you I was going to pick on you, didn't I? In class today. And the reason I pick on her because she knows the answer to everything I've asked. Yeah. A process is something that's ongoing. Is a river a process? Okay. But let me ask you this. If you put your foot in the river and take it out and put it in the river again, do you ever step in the same river twice? That's a constantly changing thing. And that's what communication is. Because patients are going to pay extreme attention not just to the words you use, but to your nonverbal behaviors. How you behave when you tell them something. And 100% of the time, the nonverbal will trump the verbal. Now, one of the things we have trouble with is words. Today, I was one of the students asked me about what was a traumatic event that I've had in surgery, and I was talking about a hepatic resection. Ted said, "Whoa! What is a hepatic resection?" Ted's absolutely right. How many of you know what that is? How many of you know what it's when you cut part of your liver out? Now you understand that, don't you? And words, the meaning of words are in people, not in the words themselves. If I say ABCs to a nursing student, what does that mean? Airway, breathing, and circulation, right? Right? You're not a nursing student, are you? Did you know that? Awesome. If I say ABCs to Aiden, what's that mean, Aiden? ABCs is the first three letters of the alphabet, isn't it? Yep. You have to get Aiden involved in this talk. Sure. Next. Okay, we've talked about communication's not a natural ability. Words have meaning. Telling is communicating. Is that true? How many times have you been told something and not communicated with? True? Telling is communicating. Telling is not communicating. Telling is telling, isn't it? Yeah. Telling is just that. And many, many times people will say, well, I told that person that. How do you detect telling and how do you detect communicating? Yeah, see. Yeah.
So it has to have like a mutual level of understanding.
Exactly, and you determine that by nonverbal behaviors. The Italian boy back there picked up on that in class today, didn't he? Yeah. That, how important that is, because I asked all of the students, what have you gotten out of this medical communication class? And it's very interesting that both classes were roughly comparable, what you got out of it, but a lot of people liked the nonverbal stuff, which is absolutely fascinating. I agree with you. And communication is both a verbal and a nonverbal process. Now, we work in healthcare, hopefully, as teams. And an individual basically working in a group does it for their own self-purpose, but a team is an organization that can put people together to create a joint product, and that joint product in healthcare can and must be safety. This is interesting. Crew resource management was first talked about after the Korean War by a guy named Flanagan at the University of Pittsburgh, and he came up with detection. How can you tell? His study as a social psychologist was to determine who's going to be a good airline pilot. And we're looking at lots of data mining information now in the election. I heard on the news. He came up with a simple question. Have you ever ridden a motorcycle? He was able to determine whether that person had sufficient risk-taking abilities to fly an airplane. Merrick and Helmreich were at the University of Texas in Austin. They're social psychologists, and they have developed the pilot, co-pilot model. When an airplane takes off, depending on the culture, if the co-pilot tells the pilot something twice and the pilot does not listen to him, then the co-pilot takes over captaining the ship. This came out of the Air Florida crash. Those adults in the room, well, all of you are adults, but those of us older in the room might remember that when Air Florida took off in Washington and ended up in the Potomac River. When they dug up that black box from the Potomac River, what they found is that the co-pilot had told the pilot 7 times during the takeoff, we're not going to clear takeoff. But the pilot, through arrogance, ignored the co-pilot and killed everybody on board. Arrogance. Dangerous. Right? Now, we all learn from our mentors, and it is our theory that people observe, mimic, and reinforce behavior, as Bandura said. And one of the ways we like to teach communication is at the bedside. It's the same as teaching ethics. You can read textbooks forever, but learning ethics, you're going to learn better at the bedside than you do in the classroom. We give a lecture because it's sort of an efficient way to deliver a lot of information, but you all learn better with hands-on activities, class discussion, group sessions, films, all sorts of ways, right? You don't like to sit and listen to a lecture after lecture after lecture. Do any of your professors give lectures? Do they bore you? Yeah, sometimes they're pretty boring. So what we like to do is make it a practical and a real life experience for you, and that's what Ted's done. How many of you have taken his MedCom class or his HealthCom class? Yeah. Did you watch some films? What films have you watched? Speak up, I'm deaf. Savages, that's the only one?
Philadelphia.
Philadelphia. What did you find interesting in Philadelphia?
The level of discrimination that Tom Hanks had to go through.
It's fascinating how our perceptual lens, it was the greatest eye-opener, and I've never taken a course in film, for me as to the ability of cinematography to portray human existence and human suffering. The camera work in that film is amazing. That scene where he's dancing around in the fireplace with the IV pole and the lawyer is talking to him, do you remember that? It's amazing. What other films? Have they seen Wit? The Doctor. Did you like The Doctor? Did Did you see any arrogance in there? But what ironic twist was there to the arrogance? Yeah, but who was the most arrogant of all? It was a woman surgeon. The ENT, the first woman he went to, she, which is not what people expect. So I don't think that biologic sex has an ownership on males or females. Females can be very arrogant also. So, and particularly in healthcare, where 50% of the physicians in medical school today are women. So men they don't own it. Handoffs. In a pediatric study of pediatric residents, and I told you this in class today, out of the University of Chicago, when giving a report, only 49% of the information is understood and carried on. In other words, when two residents sit down and sign out, only half of the material gets through. But yet, if you ask them, how much material did you comprehend, they'll say 100%. So we're very bad in handoff communication. We also get tired, which nobody does well when they're tired. System failures, authority gradient, and organizational climate. How successful do you think that Ted would be in developing a health comm major here as he's working through the process if he didn't have faculty buy-in? Two faculty members came up to me today and said, the kids like this. If he didn't have buy-in from you, the students, and certainly from the dean and the provost and the president of the university, it's got to be top-down organizational approval for any system to work. One of the things that I have recognized is I'm on Social Security and Medicare, and if we can take one step in my lifetime, I'm going to be very pleased, because changing culture takes time. And what you have to do is change the human condition. This is James Reason's theory that you can't change the human condition by swatting one mosquito at a time. You know, have you ever been in a mosquito-infested place? They sort of, you turn around and they breed. There are new mosquitoes everywhere. You've got to kind of drain the swamp. You've got to drain the swamp. You've got to change the culture. And that takes time. It's not going to happen overnight. It's a process, particularly in communication. It's not going to be a single course. It's going to be observing your professors. It's going to be observing in the clinical situation. It's going to be working in the environment, be it the inpatient, the outpatient, the nursing home, anything that is about healthcare and preventative healthcare, health departments, etc. Now, this is one of Ted's favorites, the theory of planned behavior, or the theory of reasoned action is another name for it. And what is that? Does anybody want to explain this slide? Okay. What are attitudes and what are beliefs? Did you read that? Hey, the Italian guy. What's your name again? Anthony something or other, Italian, isn't it?
Martella.
Yeah.
I'd say that attitudes are probably more expressive than beliefs. Beliefs tend to be kept to themselves more often than not.
Yeah, attitudes are whether you think something is good or bad, and beliefs are whether you think something is true or false. And you take attitudes and beliefs, and then they become a value system. Okay? Once they become values, they're ingrained. They're very difficult to change. So in the theory of planned behavior, if you have an attitude that communication is important, and the people that you care about think it's important, and you think you can do it, then it will all lead to the intention to use the behavior, and it'll ultimately become a behavior. So We have to work on all of those things. The buy-in from people above. We have to buy in from the faculty. We have to have you as students thinking that you can make a difference through improved healthcare communication. Now, this is Rogers' diffusion of innovation theory, and the poignant thing about this is, I said changing culture takes time. The innovators and the early adapters are only about 15%. So I don't expect the whole campus to buy in on this process tomorrow. It's going to take a while. And then you come along to the early majority, the late majority, and the late adapters, which are 85% of the population. So diffusing innovation takes time. This is a very innovative process that's being proposed here at Ashland. Next. Now, this is the rest of the story. This is Ernest A. Codman, who was a graduate of Harvard Medical School. He was the roommate of the famous Harvey Cushing, who made history in neurosurgery. And Ernest A. Codman, in 1913, was the chairman of the Committee on Hospital Safety of the American College of Surgeons. He said that when doctors screw up, they need to tell the public what they have done and tell the patient what they have done. He was ridiculed, he was maligned, he had very poor communication skills, and consequently in 1923, when he was made chair of the Committee on Hospital Standardization, he was kicked out of that. He died in 1940 of melanoma. He died a pauper. He had a hospital called the End Result Hospital. He published errors. He let his patients know what was happening. He developed the sarcoma registry, which basically said when you have a rare disease, you need to collaborate as a team with other healthcare providers so that you can learn more about the disease process. He was the first to develop an anesthesia record, and he didn't want to burden his widow with the cost of a tombstone. He is buried in an unmarked grave in Mount Auburn Cemetery in Boston. In 2013, the American College of Surgeons will recognize what Ernest A. Codman said in 1913. It will take 100 years before anyone will recognize the importance of my work. And we will, and have raised the money to erect a tombstone in memory of this great thinker